Welcome back to Ithaca BJJ. Today, we'll watch Professor Matt take on a blue belt, a purple belt, and a brown belt. And throughout, we'll point out key lessons and tips as these gentlemen get busy. Let's dive in. First up, we have Vince. Vince is around 220 pounds now, but when I first met him a couple of years ago, he was about 260 and an absolute beast. He's still a beast, it's just a smaller one. But trust me, when this guy gets on top of you, he still feels like he's 260 pounds. So here's Professor Matt with his signature butterfly guard. This is a master position for him, and he's constantly hitting us in sweeps with this. And watch this. You see that? Smart, Vince. He deals with that dominant grip before going anywhere else. And there it is, that famous butterfly sweep of his. But Vince gets something special on his own. There it is. Bam. That's a beautiful sweep. Let's see it again. There was a big celebration for Vince when he hits this. Listen to the original audio.
Oh, nice. Oh, highlight reel.
The reason we were so excited for Vince when he hit that sweep is because he's been working on that for a long time. And for him to get that on Professor Matt during a live session is a big accomplishment. And there's Professor Matt going for that shoulder lock, again, from his butterfly guard. But none of us are perfect. So we're going to see Vince make a slight mistake here that he ends up paying for. You see that grip that Professor Matt has on his left wrist right there? That's pretty dominant. Vince tries to advance before addressing that grip. And watch him pay for it, right there as Professor Matt hits that omoplata while still holding on to that grip. Vince tries to roll out, but Professor Matt catches him. Remember, folks, you've got to deal with those dominant grips, as we talked about in our grips video. Now Vince is getting tired, and this is pretty obvious, as Professor Matt hits a pretty easy mount. And here, he goes for the finish by setting up an obvious armbar. But, lucky for Vince, time is running out. Next up, we have a brown belt. I love watching upper belts roll. It's like watching two big kids playing in a sandbox and loving every minute of it. And once again, Professor Matt goes to that butterfly configuration. But look how this brown belt sticks himself to Professor Matt, keeps his head low, and applies pressure. You see that hip switch? He's doing that to prevent Professor Matt from gaining his guard back, all the while keeping the pressure on, and here he brings his right arm around to continue to block that hip advancement. But Professor Matt is relentless in hanging on. This is a smart move to switch to north-south. Because switching to north-south, you eliminate your opponent's hips, making it more difficult for him to escape. So he goes for a Kimura here, but Professor Matt smartly rotates with him and removes that threat. Now watch this. At this point, he looks at the camera and states, Professor Matt will never get out of this. But that celebration was short-lived. And now we see Professor Matt also, look at that, being very sticky, being very heavy. And I've been in this position many times under that pressure. And it's not something you can see from the video, but you can feel it when you're under it. And he's going to work relentlessly to clear that knee while controlling that lower arm and controlling his upper body and his shoulders. And he clears the knee and establishes side control. Next, traps that arm and goes for the finish. And there's the Americana. And now it's me and Professor Matt. I love starting on my feet. And so I'm immediately looking for my grips to set up some kind of a takedown. Of course, Professor Matt goes for that fake single leg, hoping to get a reaction out of me, but I've just seen that far too many times. And at this point, we're just playing the grip game. And Professor Matt sets me up in his butterfly. But there's this wicked butterfly counter he showed me a couple of years ago. But I find it very difficult to get there on him now. So I switch to the over-under pass. He holds on to that left leg to prevent my movement, but I can still usually hit this pass from there. And now my goal is to use my right leg to control that near hip to prevent him from recovering. Keeping myself sticky, keeping my head low. I want to get under the head, but I can't get there. So I switch because I feel that leg coming around. What I really want is to get to mount. Again, controlling the hips. Almost. And there's the mount. But you know, it's one thing to get to mount. It's another thing altogether to stay there. And I can never hold that mount against Professor Matt. So he's got his butterfly back in again. And I know he wants to take me over to his left. So I plant my butt cheek down and extend that opposite leg out to balance myself. That's going to make it difficult to hit that sweep. At the same time, we have a serious grip game going. Here I end up on the bottom. And now I'm looking for this particular move that you saw in one of our previous videos. I didn't quite get it the way I wanted, but I did get up. This is what I was looking for. So now we're back on our feet. That wasn't a fake. That was just a really lazy takedown attempt because by this time I'm getting a little bit tired. I wasn't even supposed to be working hard tonight. So here we are. I know that Professor Matt is looking to set up that butterfly again, and I'm looking to set up the counter, but he will not let me. Now here's where I make a really, really dumb mistake, and boy do I pay for it. Wait for it. And there it is. I decide to check how much time is left on the clock. And Professor Matt uses that as his golden opportunity to send me for a ride. And as he's coming on top, I'm preparing myself for that pressure I talked about earlier. And you can see it all over my face. If that looks familiar, that's why. His top pressure is something out of this world. And here we go. And here comes the mount with very little resistance, because at this point, I kind of just want it to be over. And look at the look on this man's face. That's a lion playing with his food. And if it looks familiar, well, that's because it's exactly what he did to Vince. But, like Vince, I also lucked out, because time ran out. Thanks again for joining Ithaca BJJ. And for more content like this in the future, please remember to like and subscribe. Oh, and make sure you're not looking at the clock during your rolls. Thank you.